All of the presenters on today's panel are members of the HLA Advocacy Committee, and I also wanted to give a little kudos to Meera, she's the co-chair of the Advocacy Committee, and she oversees the legislative branch of the committee, and I'm the other co-chair. I oversee the grassroots end of it. Next slide, please. Before I hand things off to Danielle, I do want to say that the views expressed in this panel are that of our speakers and not of our employers. Thank you.
Thank you, Krystal. So yes, I'm excited to be here talking to you about that. The idea of promoting your library. Up front, I want to just say a few things, what I'm not talking about and what we're really not talking about as a group. We're not talking about marketing plans or promotional materials or really even the nitty-gritty of advocacy and lobbying. What I've been interested in for a while, and I think what we've all talked about in the grassroots, is how do I go about educating the public about how amazing our libraries are through our everyday interactions? And so hopefully the idea of educating people about the greatness of public libraries and all the great things we're offering is that they eventually will become our advocates. So that's where I'm coming from in terms of what I'm trying to get across. How many times have you guys heard, I didn't know the library did that? I'm gonna just turn this on so I can see people's faces. Probably a lot. It's probably something that we think is really obvious. Maybe you've had somebody who didn't know that you like Libby existed or that we had ebooks. I had that and I was like, yeah, I think it was like 20 years ago they got started getting them. So yes, they do exist and this is how exciting for you that now you know about it. They might not know about databases. There are a lot of databases to know about, so that's kind of understandable. Or some of our non-traditional items. In the public library system, we have ukuleles you can borrow. There's netbook programs. There's been all kinds of different things we've done in the past and have upcoming. Sometimes people don't even know that we have guest speakers. They don't think of us in that way. They have an idea of what a library is. And when you tell them about the project you're working on or something you did, it's just kind of shocking to them. And for me, it's shocking for me too, because I'm like, how do you not know that? So that's one of those things that I've like, it happens all the time. So one thing that I've been thinking about a lot is how do we have our own talking points? How do we communicate all these different things that a library has to offer that we have to offer? And I think some things that we can keep in mind when creating talking points is to learn your organization's strategic goals and stay on message. Because if we're all on the same message, that makes the message louder and clearer, and we're more likely to have an effect. Get familiar with everything that your library offers. Most of us work in a very small section of our organization, but there's so much about the breadth of it. We don't have to be experts in everything, but knowing that something exists and how it could help someone is really important. I would also like to tell people to stay informed on issues in libraries at large. So signing up for blogs or newsletters. I particularly like the Publisher Weeklies does like a end of the week roundup on library news. And it's a great way of just reading something really quick that comes in my email and I kind of know what's happening. It can be upsetting. I'm not going to lie. Some of it is pretty hard to read because it affects, our foundational ideas as a profession, but it's good to know what's happening. And also, I think it's really important to focus on the concrete things that add value to your patrons or to the public. So sometimes I think we can start talking about theory and the idea of libraries, but if we can say, here's this one thing that affects you and this is how, I think that's more memorable. And then the other thing, if you've been provided talking points on a project or initiative, please use them. Part of my job actually is helping to write some of those talking points, and a lot of thought goes into it. So when we're talking about different things and maybe we go off message, you never know how far that's going to travel and what it's going to turn into. So if we can all keep saying the same thing, we're more likely to get the message across. Oh, and I also want to say the talking points from your organization. A great tip is to pull phrases from those and then start integrating into what you're saying, and then that'll help you later. One thing that I want to say I think makes a huge difference is when you're answering a question or talking to someone in general about what you're doing or what your library does, is to focus on your impact instead of the thing that you're doing. So for example, what do you do at the library? And you say, oh, I run story times. Okay, yeah, that's true, most likely if you're a children's librarian. But what if you answered instead on what your impact is? What do you do at the library? I help parents and caregivers promote kindergarten readiness at the library so that their young children can start school ready to learn. Wow, that sounds more impressive. And it is exactly what they're doing, right? So how would you do that? So I'm sure a lot of you are familiar with the idea of an elevator speech. And if you're like me, this can seem very intimidating, especially because the way I've seen it pitched before is that you're getting to an ask, you're asking someone for something. You feel like you need to have data behind it. But I think for the purposes of what I'm talking about, it can be a lot easier and a really easy package. So one thing that I learned about these elevator pitches from everything I learned is that they have some guidelines. So keeping it simple and jargon free, including a benefit, customizing it for your audience. You want to practice it so it sounds natural and conversational. You want to be enthusiastic, don't rush, and you can use it as a way to start your conversation. That's a lot to keep in mind. And you're thinking, how on earth do I write something that's going to be short that's that? Well, the people at ALSC came up with a really great formula that has helped me a lot. I learned this as part of the Every Child Ready to Read. And I really started just manipulating it to be for anything. It's so flexible. So the idea is you take I and then what you do for your target audience at the library so that, and then you put the proven or expected positive outcome for the target audience. So for example, I'm the staff development coordinator for the Hawaii State Public Library System. What on earth does that mean? Which is what I usually get when I tell people what my job title is. I can say that, well, what I do is I provide professional development opportunities for library staff so that they can confidently provide the best service for library patrons. That's what I do. That's the heart of what I do. There's a lot more to it that people don't really need to know. But the gist of it, why I exist and what this role is that. That's what my benefit is to the organization, hopefully, if everything goes well. But the great thing about that formula is you can customize it to be for programs or services or new initiatives. So if I was to take that formula, I could say the library is offering telehealth kits at the library so that people who don't have digital connections at home will be able to have healthcare. That's a way you can pitch it. And it's one sentence. It's not too hard to memorize. And luckily that way, when you're out and about talking to people, you can pull it out and say what it is. You could also kind of use those if you're in the library and you start getting similar questions about why you're doing something. Having a one sentence thing is kind of easy to do that. I'd like to give you a chance to try this. This is the simplified formula. If you want to think about something that you've been wanting to think about, how do you promote it or explain what it is, give it a shot. And let's just take a minute to give that a shot to see what you do. And you can put it in chat if you like. See people thinking. So I'm going to assume they're coming in. Okay. I'm the GovDocs librarian at UHM, where I help people find and use government information. Yeah, that could work. I collect and report data about the library system to help tell the story of why library is important and what we do for the community. Yeah. I work on reducing the cost of textbooks at my college so that students can find college more affordable. That's great. I'm a librarian at Bishop Museum, and I help connect people with resources to better their research and understanding their history. Yeah, so these are all great. And like I said, I think you can also change it around and be about services. Oh, I'm an access service librarian at UH Hilo, providing necessary library services to Hilo's and CC students. I coordinate the school library program at UHN so that teachers develop their skills they need to support their schools and students. I think these are all great. I think, like I said, it's really fun to try and think about how you can, oh, that moved through all my slides. I'm sorry. You can think about different ways of using it, like I said. So if you wanted to talk about a program or an initiative and take an I out of it, you can replace the I with the thing. You can kind of play with it a little bit. It's not meant to be restrictive. It's just a way to get started. So that's kind of what I wanted to talk about just how do you find words to get started on how do you start promoting something. And I did do a little bit of research in terms of other places you can find information. So the links to elevator speech from ALA and ALSC is on there, but we also found a resource called My Library Is from Rails, which I believe stands for Reaching Across Illinois Library Services or Systems. And it was a really great thing to kind of go through and see how they've packaged some of that information. IFLA had a 10-minute library advocacy blog series. So it goes through some exercises in terms of in 10 minutes, what you can do to kind of get yourself prepared to think about some things. Really simple stuff like how would you describe your library in 10 words? Who can you think of to reach out to? And there's also something called Frontline Advocacy Toolkit, which I thought was really interesting, but doesn't quite fit what my section of this was about. So I'm going to go ahead and pass it over to our next presenter.
Thank you, Danielle. All right, so I'm going to talk about how you can connect with your stakeholders. And first, I want to start out by discussing how you can figure out who your stakeholders are, especially in the context of what we're talking about today, which is promoting your library through everyday conversations. So the great thing about this is that whether or not your job in your library requires you to work directly with library patrons or the public, you actually live and work with people in the community throughout. So individuals that you see every day, your relatives, your neighbors, your friends, those are the people that need to hear what's important about your library because they know that libraries are cool and that you work at one, but they don't necessarily know what you do. And all of those people are potential supporters of your library. So you, in this picture, are interacting with these people that I put question marks for because you don't know who they are, really. It's everyone you run into. So as the face and voice of the library for the people in your community, you have a lot that you can pass on to them. Next slide, please. So I wanted to have you put in the chat, open question, who do you interact with on any given day, especially outside the library? And I'll give you a minute to throw some things in the chat and I'll just read them aloud and make some connections. Teachers, yeah, especially if you have kids in school, you have their teachers, family members, and family members could be facing a number of different life decisions or issues or whatever. Maybe you have a friend or a family member who's about to have a kid. You could talk up the parenting programs and parenting resources at the library. People waiting, people in your building waiting for elevators. Okay, I have to think about that one. I have to get creative how you can connect with them. Tai Chi Club, fellow faculty students, people you interact with at the coffee shop or the grocery store, friends that work in government, people you know on Facebook. Oh, okay, so lots of people that you can interact with and spread the word. So thank you. Let's next talk about what you can do to look for ways to share the library and what the library does naturally into conversations with all of those people. Dogs, oh yeah, dogs are great. I love it. So you can move on to the next one. And I'm going to spend just a couple minutes talking through some suggestions about what you might say to these different people. First, I would say to start with what you're the most comfortable talking about. I know Danielle said get to know everything that the library does, and that's true. Just start as you're starting to do this work. Start with the things that you feel most passionate about, because that passion and enthusiasm will show through. So if you love reading ebooks and your friend is talking about, oh, hey, I'm reading this book, you can ask them, oh, hey, where do you get your ebooks? They might say Amazon. And then you could probably say, hey, did you know that the library offers ebooks with your library card? You don't have to pay anything. Super easy. So just inserting those small things in can really raise awareness about what the library programs offer. I know that Danielle mentioned ukulele. So sometimes people are like, oh, I'm going to try this out. I'm interested, or my kid might want to play this. You can say, yeah, you can borrow it for a week. You can take it home and try it out before you decide if you're going to buy one. So it's a great way to test drive instruments like an ukulele. The idea here is to make it fit into your everyday conversations so that it's natural and people will just kind of pick up these tidbits that will hopefully sink into their brains so that they think of the library the next time they think about an ukulele, or the next time they think about buying the next ebook. They might think, oh, I wonder if the library might have this available. And the second tip here about thinking about who you're talking to, I just wanted to mention, this reminds me of how librarians are really about connecting people with information and resources. So just using your listening skills to kind of bridge that gap between random things that people are saying and then opportunities for sharing library resources. So it's a little bit, you have that skill already, I know. You just have to practice it outside of your work. Okay, next slide, please. So this is a common one for us. You might think, oh, but I'm shy. How am I going to start this conversation? So I like to remember that half of the people I'm talking to are potentially shy, maybe not shy, but they're introverts, right? They're not necessarily going to start random conversations with you. So if you're trying to insert library resources into your conversations, I always suggest starting with family and friends, because you already have a relationship with them and they already know a little bit about what you do, but they're happy to hear more. Also remember that most people have very positive opinions about libraries. So numerous studies or polls will show that people love libraries, they trust librarians, but at the same time, they say they actually don't know what librarians do. So this is a good time to reinforce what we do and the impact we make. The second tip that I like to use is to let your clothes or accessories start the conversation. That way you don't have to break the ice. If somebody's more outgoing and they see my t-shirt, this actually happened. I was wearing a Books Are Magic shirt and a sales associate said, wow, books are magic. And I asked him, oh, hey, what's the cool book you read recently? And he said, actually, I haven't read anything recently, but growing up, I read all of these Dungeon and Dragon books and they were so cool. They had these pictures. He went on and on about the books. And I was like, wow, that's really cool. You know what I saw at some public libraries recently were D&D programs for teenagers. I thought that was really neat. I didn't say that I'm working in a library. I didn't even say what library offered it because I couldn't remember. But just planting that seed in his mind, hopefully he now thinks of the library as a place that might offer D&D resources for the community. So turning that thanks when somebody says, I love your shirt, and following up with, what have you read recently? That's a good segue into library programs and services. Based on what they say, if they say, no, I don't have any time to read anymore, you can mention that ebooks are available and you can put on your phone, wherever you go, you can read. So those are some of the tips that I have. And I think at this point, I'm turning it over to Jessica. Thank you.
Thank you, Meera. Okay, so the next part of our presentation, we'll talk about workplace ethics and advocacy. So if you're a member of HLA, you've seen, our postings about the advocacy committee, and we might ask for volunteers to do things and you wonder, well, what are you really doing and what can I do, knowing that we're state employees? So this is what I'm going to cover. So you'd like to advocate for libraries, but you don't know what that means or what you can do. So when you look at the definition of advocate, according to Merriam-Webster, it's one who defends or maintains a cause or proposal. or one who supports or promotes the interests of a cause or group. So, we sort of identify more with the second one. But notice that it does not say we force people, we decide for them, or strong arm, or bribe, or lobby, which is a stronger word I'll touch on. So what you're doing is, you're talking about the great things that libraries do, and what they can offer, things that Danielle and Meera have talked about so far. But we're not saying strongly to do anything. People have free will and free choice. So next slide, please. So cans and should nots. So as a state of Hawaii employee, you can talk about how great libraries are. You do that at your job every day. And we've shown you ways how you can do that out in the community. You can communicate support they need, if that's where your topic goes towards. You can attend community events and identify yourself as a member of HLA. We've done some parades and things that we've walked in, or community events like Children and Youth Day, or the Book and Music Festival, things like that, where you're representing your Hawaii Library Association. Now, things that you should not is participate in advocacy on work time. So, if I wanted to be in a parade, I couldn't just go on my work time and do it. I would have to take vacation. You can't use state resources to kind of prepare for these sort of events. So you can't use like work markers and paper to make posters. That would be a concrete example. And the work that we do for the advocacy committee, we're using our personal email, and we're doing that off work time. Okay, and then we'll touch a little bit about lobbying and how that's different. Lobbyists typically, when you think of political lobbyists, they are much stronger with their opinions. Oftentimes they're really urging people to vote a certain way on issues, or a certain person to vote for, or they're spending large amounts of time at the Capitol, and they may get paid for it. So in other states, library associations have paid staff that are not librarians, and that is their job, and so they're not state employees, they're separate, and a state can choose to do that, but you're not a state employee. Does that make sense? Okay. All right, next slide. So visiting the Capitol and talking to legislators, you've seen articles written in American Libraries, Library Journal. There's a lot of talk about, let's do this. Let's speak for, intellectual freedom, or a number of issues. So you can certainly do that. And what you can do is present information to senators and representatives. And this is if you're identifying yourself as, I'm a member of HLA, Hawaii Library Association, and you're presenting them with information. You're not, again, telling them what to do or say or vote. And again, that has to be off work time. So an example could be there's a resolution, which is, this is true and factual and current. There's a resolution asking the Department of Ed to hire more school librarians. So your action, you visit each lawmaker's office and drop off information sheets that highlight the benefits of having school librarians. And you let them know that 24% of schools are staffed with school librarians. So you're just leaving them information. Now, if you're invited to the Capitol to be a representative, so maybe they know they want to build a new library, and it's, in your area, and you're the librarian, they may ask you to come and talk about, why you think that's important, issues around, surrounding it. So they've invited you to come and talk. Or, you got an award and they want to recognize that, that can be on work time because you're invited as your profession. Okay, and here's a tip. If you are visiting the Capitol on matters that relate to library issues, it's always a good idea to inform your supervisor so that they're aware. And that's many reasons so that they won't be caught off guard if someone mentions it to them. And so that they can be aware, sometimes our higher ups have things that they're working on, because that's part of their job to work closer with the legislators. And, you can all be on the same page, basically. And then the last little note, this is all, within the context of your job. But if you choose to take a stand on an issue or support a certain political official, if you do that as a private citizen on your own time, on the weekend, you're not going up and saying, I'm a librarian, I'm a state employee. You're just saying, I'd like to talk to you as a mom about staffing school libraries, and it's important to me because my children X, Y, and Z, or, I would love more services for my aging parents, can you fund that? Something like that. So, if you're outside and your own private citizen, you have a little more free reign, of course. Okay, and next slide. So what if you're not sure? Because there are gray areas and, we might not fit into clear categories. So luckily, we've probably heard of the State Ethics Commission, and they are set up just to help us with those questions. You can call them. They have a website. They really want to actually hear from you. And I had a colleague call them because they weren't sure about what we might do on the advocacy committee and what we should do and keep in mind. And they were so helpful, and they were really glad that they called, and they said, call us anytime. Because they directed us to their different quick guides, which you'll see on the bottom of the slide. And this one is for campaign activities for state officials and employees, because there's really nothing specific to advocacy for your professional organization or as your profession. But they said that this one is the closest that we should follow. And a lot of it is what I've covered about state time, state facilities, not using state resources. And so you can always check that out. It's on the website, and up at the top, there's advice. And so that's where you can get to this document. But always call, they want to help. And you can be sure, that you're acting in good faith and that you've checked whether things are A-okay. Okay, well, that is the rest of what I have are just links there from that State Ethics Commission. They have a High Road newsletter, which they're in hiatus. I don't know if they'll go back to producing, but it has scenarios too, which are great to check. And then the American Library Association has some links about public policy and advocacy. They have a library that brings together some resources. So thank you for your time.
Thank you, Jessica.
Back over to Danielle.
Okay, thank you. I was checking the chat real quick. So one of the things we wanted to make sure we had time for today was some time for us to talk about tough topics, because I'm sure this is something we've all encountered. You're just out and about in the world, and then something comes out of left field that you don't know how to answer. Sometimes that's just a misconception or somebody not knowing, being aware of the scope of an issue. Sometimes it's more than that. Sometimes it's political in nature, and it can get really awkward. And I'm usually pretty good at handling things, and I can say that I've had situations where I've not quite known how to handle it. And so what I want to say for this section is I'm not an expert on any of this, but I am very interested in talking together and brainstorming responses and techniques about what we think. So I'm going to go ahead and tell you a personal example of something weird that happened to me at a fast food restaurant. I didn't tell the other presenters about this. So basically what happened was, and it's really what got me thinking about, I need to practice how to handle unusual encounters. I went to a Taco Bell. It was after work and I needed just something comforting. It had been a very long day. And I pulled up. There wasn't anybody in the line. The guy at the window was like, "Oh, how are you?" And I said, "Good, how are you doing?" He said, "Oh, it's been a long day." And I said, "Me too." And he said, "Oh, really?" And I was like, "Yeah." He's like, "What do you do?" And I said, "I'm a librarian." He's like, "You don't know." And I was like, "What?" Okay. It was very strange. And I just for some reason couldn't break the interaction and was like, "Well, we're public service. Weird things happen." And he just kept arguing with me. And it was the weirdest moment. And then I thought about it for like weeks, trying to figure out like what should I have done in that situation? Because why was this man so weirdly aggressive with me when all I wanted was a taco? And that was a very strange situation. And I don't know what would have been a better way to handle it. I think I should have just kept driving, but that's what happened. And that's how I started thinking about this. So it made me go look up some tips about things. And one of the big ones is to be mindful of the time and place. Because sometimes when you're at a drive-through, you can just say like, "All right, buddy, this isn't about me," and move on. Maybe it's something that needs a longer discussion. Who knows? Pick your battles, similar. Sometimes you'll have conversations where people will say something a little odd, and it helps to just be open and stay curious and ask like, "Okay, but where did you hear that? Or why did you think that? I'm curious about how you got there." Um, Avoiding personal attacks or labeling, I think we should all know that one. Listening, asking questions. And I think the listening is actually listening to what they're not saying or maybe what's underneath what they're saying. Saying thanks and validating, that can be kind of hard sometimes, but saying, "Oh, well, thank you for telling me about that. What I'm hearing is this." And that's that thing you hear in customer service all the time is, "What I'm hearing is you're very concerned about safety," or something, whatever it is, even if that's not exactly what they said. You can also ask permission to share your views. And this is a little bit interesting because when you say, "Oh, thank you. What I'm hearing is that you're concerned about children's safety. Can I tell you what my perspective is on it is?" And if they say yes, they're agreeing to listen. So that kind of helps you bridge that. Like, "Can I tell you where I'm coming from?" Share the why you think that. Sometimes we need to reflect on our own bias. You know, if somebody says, "I heard it from a certain source," and you might say, "Well, I don't need to listen to them." There's still somebody you can talk to, hopefully, and remember what you have in common. But I do also want to say no one to walk away because some of these conversations are not going to be productive and they're also not going to be for you and your mental health, possibly. If it's something that you really can't engage in, that's okay. You don't have to. And I think that's important to note. I think what we wanted to have is, thank you. Whoops, that went too fast. We wanted to have a bit of a group brainstorm, and we talked as a group about some tough topics or things that may have come up in our own lives, and we wrote some scenario questions. So Krystal dropped a document in the chat that has those, so you should be able to open it.
We're running short on time though. So if there's any general questions, we have a few seconds for that. If not, you can reach out to the HLA Advocacy Committee. I'll put the email into the chat.
Well, I just really want to thank our presenters, Danielle, Jessica, Meera, and Krystal, for their wonderful presentation and sharing all of this great information that will help us to answer those tough questions and have our elevator speech ready and know what we can and cannot do when we're advocating for our library. So I really appreciate all of the time that you all took to assemble all of this information and present it. And this session has been recorded, so the recording will be available on the HLA website soon. So thank you all very much for presenting, and thanks to all of you for attending and participating in this session. Mahalo.